Hey guys, welcome to Brian's Man Cave. So I was noticing that a lot of this news feed going around about the Atari 400 Mini, and I thought that's an interesting choice for a mini console. Now this is an original one. This one I remember picking this guy up quite a while ago. I had to make a decision. Well, I didn't have to make a decision, but I wanted to make a decision about what kind of a system I wanted to pick up. And I was thinking, you know, the Atari 400, there was the Atari 800, or maybe just getting the 5200. And the thing I didn't like about the 5200 is, well, it's huge. It's a big console. Controller problems, and, you know, the games, it's a limited library. Whereas the 400 and the 800 had a bigger library, a lot more games. Not to mention, the local store I was at, not the store, well, it was a flea market, but they had a whole ton of them, these Atari cartridges for sale that would work on this. And so I grabbed them at a really cheap price, and then I located a console. Now, the thing is, these mini consoles seem to be what is kind of our future for retro gaming. Aside from loading emulators on your computer, which, you know, a lot of us can do, it's not too difficult. You go to certain sites, they have the emulator, you download it, you install it, and then you go find the ROMs everywhere. I mean, it does take a little bit of work, a little bit of understanding of how they work. You have to have a proper controller that's going to connect to your computer, that's going to work with the emulator. Whereas when you buy these things, well, not this one, but, you know, what's coming out, the 400 Mini, you just plug it into your TV and you're ready to go. Now, from what I understand, this cartridge port is probably going to be, you know, just fake. Just like all the rest of them, they don't actually take real cartridges. They're an emulation box. They're just a plastic casing with an emulator inside and, you know, preloaded games. Now, what is cool, though, is that it's supposedly going to have the ability to load new games. Whereas some of them do that and some of them don't. I'm thinking of, like, a lot of the Atari flashbacks. I think there was one of them that allowed you to load games on. Also, the little guy, you could load games on that. But most of them, they're pretty much contained within the emulator, and that's it. You have your games, and those are the only ones that play. Things like the Nintendo one. There was the I don't know what happened to that. The NES Mini came out. It was like a huge, like, everybody had to get one. They flew off the shelves. The pricing, the aftermarket pricing went crazy. I remember doing a video on that way long ago about how much people were asking for those things. Now they're just like collector's items sitting on people's shelves. Then there was an SNES one. There was a Genesis one. There was a few different Genesis ones, Sega ones. You know, and the Commodore 64 Mini, the C64 Mini, which they made one. It had a fake keyboard. And then they made supposedly another one. I've never seen it, but I've seen the ads for it. Actually has a full functioning keyboard, so it's a little bit more like it. More recently, we've had the Atari 2600 Plus come out, which is a little bit different because it actually takes the physical cartridges. However, it's still an emulation device. It literally dumps the ROM into memory, and then you play the ROM off the cartridge instead of actually just reading the cartridge itself and playing, which is a different technology. It's not. And I've seen a lot of debates on whether it's good or bad. People are trying out cartridges. It supposedly plays 7800 cartridges, so people are testing those and all this other stuff. You know, a lot of videos going up of people testing cartridges on it, seeing what works. Then you have to update the firmware. You know, try and add ROMs to it. All that kind of stuff is you know, up in the air on whether these things work. There's even the Retron 77 that came out prior to it, which also is a cartridge-based system, but runs off of ROMs, so you can actually load ROMs onto it and play it through that. ColecoVision, well, CollectorVision made a ColecoVision console, essentially, but it's actually a real working one. It actually plays the cartridges. You don't put ROMs necessarily on it. You put the cartridge in, and it actually plays from the cartridge. Actual hardware, and I was wondering where we were gonna go, or are we going to eventually get back to that point where they're gonna start making consoles that are the real thing instead of these emulation devices? But as of today, it's still the emulation devices. This console that's coming out, the Atari 400, or at least from all the advertisements I've seen of it and people talking about it, it looks like it's going to be an emulation device, just like the rest of them. So is this our future? Is this where we're going? Is this going to be the state of retro gaming? Because I know it's not easy, I guess, for modern times to be making these hardware run exactly the same way as it did back in the 80s. And I'm not sure why. I don't know what the issue is. I don't know if it's cost. I mean, that seems to be like the number one reason, in my opinion, is probably the cost. I mean, if you think about it, this requires a lot more parts to it, I would assume, that also requires a specific coding inside of it to understand the cartridges, and then you have to physically make the cartridges, you have to put the ROMs on the cartridge. You run into a lot of issues too with licensing issues. Whereas this, it's an emulation device, so they build it's just an emulator could be on like a Raspberry Pi type of device, or it's not too hard for them to just slap some ROMs on there. From what I understand, there's going to be like 25 games on it. Of course, those are not going to be anything that's commercially, licensed. So you're not going to get Donkey Kong. You're not going to get any of the real popular, the games that are all licensed to very popular people like Nintendo, or companies I should say, like Nintendo. So you're probably going to be like the very basic games. Anything that's free to the world. I don't even know what that would be. Like asteroids, or I don't know. Not sure what they're going to give for free. I haven't actually seen much other information on that. But yeah, it just made me wonder, where are we going with these emulation boxes? Are we gonna get like every possible console that came out from 1980 up until like the 2000s? Because we even had the PlayStation Mini, which I didn't see it do too well. In fact, I remember it first came out, it was like $100, at one point, and then all of a sudden it was like 20. People were buying them and literally just hacking them and turning them into just standard emulation for other things, or they were doing things to it. It wasn't the way it was meant to be. And it made me wonder again, would have been too hard to just make a brand new PlayStation that would play the original games. But then, of course, you're going to run into, now you got to find all the original PlayStation CDs, which there's probably a ton of them. I mean, you go out to any of the retro gaming stores, they got racks and racks of PlayStation 2, PlayStation 3, all the way up. So, I think the games are out there. It's just, it makes you wonder, where are we going to go from here? Are we just going to be left with emulation devices? And what are the longevity of these things? I mean, this console, this computer, is old. I mean, this is like 40 years old, somewhere around that. And it still works. I mean, you still plug it in, you put the cartridge in, you put the game, turn the game on, it works. Are these emulation devices going to be like that? Are they going to be faulty at best? Or the fact that some of them connect to the internet or require the firmware? I don't know. Like, even the material that they're made out of, sometimes they feel very light and cheap. And you can end up paying quite a bit of money. I mean, the Atari 2600 Plus is pretty pricey for what it is. You can get a real Atari for a lot cheaper in a lot of cases, right? So, and the real Atari seems a little bit more, more to it. It seems stronger, tougher than these emulation devices. But anyways, I like where they're going. I mean, it's not that I'm against the emulation device. I don't hate them. I'm just wondering if this is the direction that we're going to continue on, because I know that the emulation devices will hook up to your big flat screen HDMI TVs pretty nicely. You don't have to rig up the old channel switch boxes or get those little things to plug into your coax cable, which might possibly disappear from TVs at one point in time. We don't even know. So yeah, I can kind of see that. I get it. That it does make it easier for the nostalgia people who maybe grew up with this thing and just forgot about it for decades, and now said, hey, I remember having that. I want to play that again, so I'm going to buy that device. But again, is that really the people that are buying it? Or is it people like me who have the originals but still want to have this kind of smaller version of it just for a keepsake? I don't know. Anyways, this thing's pretty heavy. I'm holding this thing and my arm is pretty, like, tired right now. Let me know what you think. Throw some comments down below. I always like to see these things coming out in the market. It really brings back the nostalgia feel, and it's nice that it can be brought into the modern world. But I'd like to hear what you have to say. Throw your comments down below. Hope you subscribe. Talk to you later. Oh my God, my arm.